The following episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television. Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernie or Bust Show, and top of the morning to ya. Our millennial pundits are still trying to wrap their minds around the idea that the DNC is losing on purpose. They still seem so incredulous. Okay, here's the plan. First, I will lose to Trump, then the DNC will blame Bernie. Joe Biden for president.
But when it's every single issue that you're putting your middle finger in my face, what am I supposed to do with that? And then people try to shame you to fall in line to go vote for him. And Trump's bad, but what about the kids in cages? I guess you don't care about the kids in cages. Joe Biden and Barack Obama also put kids in cages. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. There was a famous photo that went viral about a year ago, and everybody was, oh my God, Trump's putting kids in cages. Turns out the picture was taken during the Obama administration. They called Obama the deporter-in-chief. He deported 3 million people. So every little thing that they try to manipulate you, with, you dig into it and you find out they're full of it. Again, I'm not unreasonable, but the last election, you gave me the option of Hillary Clinton, who was wrong on virtually every major policy in her entire life and did not vote with the left position. And you gave me Joe Biden, who's Hillary Clinton plus cognitive decline. What am I supposed to do with that? What are you supposed to do in a situation where every issue you care about, you're convinced that this guy's not going to fight for it at all? I'll tell you what you do with that. You do nothing with it. You do nothing with it.
Yeah, you do nothing. You don't pile into the streets. You don't wave your signs. You don't wear your yellow vests. You just sit there, right? You sit there and bang on your high chair and complain. You don't advocate for Bernie or bust. You don't think about leverage. You just expect them to be reasonable. Well, they've been real reasonable so far, right, Kyle? Again, wake up. You've got to see this. You've got to understand that they're losing on purpose because they're afraid of Bernie. You were there in Philadelphia. You saw what went on there. What are you thinking is going to happen this time? We really should have seen this coming. The Bernie or Bust show saw it coming. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has. It never will. Dear Burners, Dementia Joe is how much your party hates you. By Paul Street. You have owners. They own you. Mr. Bernie Sanders, the New York Times reported last Tuesday, has built a following of voters who want and expect more from their Democratic Party, from their government, and from their country. That's true enough with some key qualifications. It's not their party any more than it's their government or their country. Like the U.S. government and the nation itself, the Democratic Party is owned by the capitalist class. Expecting anything decent from it is a fool's game and always has been. It's like George Carlin used to say, forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They've got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all the news and information you get to hear. Feel the hate. For many years, I've been trying to tell progressives who cling to the quixotic notion of advancing social democracy, peace, and environmental sanity through the Democratic Party that the party's corporate establishment hates them and would rather lose to the ever more fascistic Republican Party than to the moderately social democratic wing of their own party. The evidence of this hatred, not too strong a word, is plentiful. Think of Barack Obama's future White House Chief of Staff and future racist Chicago Mayor 1% Rahm Emanuel working as a foul-mouthed right-wing congressional leader to purge anti-war candidates from the party's 2006 House of Representatives candidate roster. The sociopath Emanuel would go on to regularly threaten and abuse progressives who meekly tried to push the militantly neoliberal Citigroup captive Obama administration towards small measures of social and environmental decency. His corporatist blood brother Obama made sure to purge advocates of single-payer health insurance, irrelevantly supported by most of the U.S. populace, from the national health care reform debate in 2009. There was nothing new or surprising about all that. The second half of the Jimmy Carter administration was dedicated to corporate-friendly deregulation that helped usher in the tragic two-term Reagan presidency after Carter kicked progressives to the curb. The Bill Clinton presidency was a monument to smug, poor corporate, free market politics and policy, with the party's progressive wing treated with contemptuous disdain. David, tell me something interesting. That was then First Lady Hillary Clinton's dismissive response as head of the White House's Health Reform Initiative to Harvard medical professor David Himmelstein in 1993. Himmelstein was head of Physicians for a National Health Program. He had just told her about the remarkable possibilities of a comprehensive single-payer Canadian-style health plan supported by more than two-thirds of the U.S. public. Beyond backing by a citizen supermajority, Himmelstein noted, single payer would provide comprehensive coverage to the nation's 40 million uninsured while retaining free choice in doctor selection and being certified by the Congressional Budget Office as the most cost-effective plan on offer. The Democrats' contempt for their left flank, Clark Iverson recently reminded me, was laid bare in the 1968 Chicago police riot at the Democratic National Convention, and it has basically remained in place ever since. Indeed.
In modern political history, the Democratic Convention in Chicago in '68 is really the start of kind of protest movements that we see today.
The police were pushing the group I was in through the windows and coming into the hotel in the glass and beating us. Outside, somebody shouted, "The whole world is watching, the whole world is watching." That became the chant as people were tear gassed and beaten and taken away to jail.
The power of television beaming those images, creating a spectacle that overshadowed the convention itself, is what made the convention to become much more organized, carefully created and produced and controlled. It became an event more akin to the Olympic Games or the Super Bowl, with the idea being, of course, safety, but also avoiding having the story be what's happening outside the arena instead of inside the arena. That's why you see today these so-called free speech zones, where there is protest and there is dissent expressed at the conventions, but it's done in a controlled area that is closely guarded by law enforcement. In 2004, during the Iraq War, there were large protests down some of the largest avenues in Manhattan.
I protested at the 2004 Republican National Convention. It was a massive demonstration. National media and global media covered it, but none of that coverage came out in real time. So if you weren't there, you couldn't really get a sense of what happened. It was very quickly broken up. There were a large number of arrests, which later resulted in a class action lawsuit that the protesters actually won.
What is that telling us, people? It's pre-rigged at the convention, too, you can bet. You can bet they've got a big plan for Milwaukee. She said that none of that was shown to the world in real time.
Because it was illegal to beat them and arrest them.
It makes him wrong.
What makes this year different, leading up to the two conventions, is what we've seen so far during this campaign.
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Unprecedented amount of protest and violence at Trump events has some people concerned about what's going to take place in Cleveland.
We won't tolerate violence of any kind. It's your right to voice your opinion, and we even allow people to march in the streets. But if it becomes a safety issue, then we'll have to do what law enforcement does and keeping everybody safe.
Does anyone have a towel?
Everybody's safe.
The convention center will actually be in what's called a security zone, under the control of the Secret Service, with admission only with credentials.
Did you hear that? A security zone under the control of Secret Service. They just say it like nothing. A security zone under the control of Secret Service. Admission by credential only. I've seen people say blithely that we're going to shut down the convention if they don't nominate Bernie. With the militarized police around that place, it's not going to be easy to shut it down. If only you'd listened to me back in July and we had gotten serious about Bernie or bust.
The but the city assured us that people in Progressive Field would be able to see and hear the marchers.
And certainly in Philadelphia, too, Bernie Sanders has a cadre of supporters on the left who are not happy that he lost the nomination. Taking that and also the general protest movement aligned with the left, it's a recipe for a sizable protest as well.
Protesters will be allowed to stand on FDR Park. Now that may sound to you like they're going to be right across the street, but it's a 9-lane highway with a median with trees in it. So you see, it's not a lot of visibility.
I think that the frustration that people have are the same, but things have changed a lot. And now, if you're at a protest, you see, hundreds of thousands of images being shared. So the whole world is watching. That's very exciting.
So make sure you're snapping a lot of pictures when they're beating us and arresting us in Milwaukee. An unforgivable sin, complicating a coronation, 2016. 4 years ago, the moderately social democratic progressive Democrat Bernie Sanders broke the rules by turning his 2016 presidential candidacy into something more than just a nice foil to make Hillary Clinton's nomination seem like less of a prearranged corporate Democratic nomination. It was an unforgivable sin. The Democratic establishment responded with venomous scorn. They called the senator from Vermont all kinds of nasty names and made sure to rig the primaries against radical Bernie, who nonetheless dutifully campaigned for the dismal, dollar-drenched, demobilizing, and doomed Hillary in the general election. So what if Sanders was far better positioned to defeat the supremely dangerous fascist-style Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump? The Democrats are first and foremost about serving corporate sponsors, not winning elections, much less social justice or environmental sanity, and those sponsors did not and do not want even a mildly social democratic candidate at the top of the Democratic ticket. Why, you may ask? Because then they'd have to change things. They'd have to give an actual shit about U.S. workers. They'd have to give an actual shit about the world's climate. We can't have that. Democratic red baiters. The 2020 primary campaign has taken the elitist class hatred that reigns atop the Democratic Party and its many affiliated media outlets to a new level. I have been following the liberal elite's unmitigated and corporate-funded loathing and ignoring of Bernie Sanders for much of the last year. It's not a pretty story. The ruling class contempt has come replete with noxious red-baiting and flat-out slander combined with absurdly false claims that the richest country in world history can't afford to make healthcare a human right or to move off the fossil fuel addiction that is collapsing human civilization. You know the thing. All of this is as expected, as is the standard claim that the progressive candidate, Sanders, is unelectable, even though he was the most electable potential Democratic nominee. This is standard operating procedure. What's different this time is the extent to which the corporate Democratic media politics machine is willing to make its determination to lose to the Republicans rather than to the progressive wing of its own party grotesquely obvious by advancing a candidate who is clearly losing his marbles. I'd like to say that Biden is unelectable because he's corporist and imperialist whose record and platform stand well to the right of majority progressive public opinion on numerous key issues: healthcare, Social Security, climate change, the minimum wage, bankruptcy protection, financial regulation, the Pentagon budget, war, and more. All of that and more helps damage Biden as a presidential candidate, but the deepest nail in Biden's electability coffin may be his obvious cognitive decline. It's clear as day. He confused his wife with his sister on stage last week. He sometimes doesn't know what day it is or what state he's in. He says he's running for the Senate. He has impulse control issues that are a classic sign of dementia. He called a Warren supporter in Iowa fat, and too old to vote. He called a young woman at one of his events a lying dog-faced pony soldier. He tells ridiculous and garbled stories about a parking lot confrontation with a black tough named Corn Pop. He says he learned about roaches when he was a lifeguard and likes it when kids sit on my lap. He tells poor black families to put the record player on, so kids can hear the words. He can't remember a key phrase, all men are created equal, from the Declaration of Independence, and so tells a crowd, "You know the thing." Yes, you know the thing. Deleting dementia, a classic Orwellian moment. I could go on, but won't, because doing so would be too depressing and start to feel like ableism and elder abuse. Glenn Greenwald is correct. It is visible to the naked eye that the 77-year-old 6-term senator and 2-term vice president is in serious cognitive decline. That is a grave matter, not just because the establishment wing of the Democratic Party wants to put him in charge of the world's most dangerous nuclear arsenal, a large chunk of the planet's health, and the welfare of hundreds of millions of people, let's just say billions of people, because that's the truth, but also because it directly pertains to whether he can sustain the rigors and spotlight of a general election against the incumbent president. And multiple incidents over the past couple weeks, from Biden's forgetting the words of the most iconic and memorized passage of the Declaration of Independence, to confusing his wife for his sister, to spouting sentences that make no sense, have only intensified those worries. Truly horrifying is the Democratic Party media and politics establishment's Orwellian determination to squelch public discussion of Biden's pitiful mental state, a problem of which the establishment is fully cognizant. It was Democrats who first raised the problem of Biden's unmistakable cerebral bankruptcy, but Greenwald notes, as the Democratic establishment has united with creepy speed and obedience behind Biden in order to stop the Sanders candidacy, those who now raise these concerns instantly come under a withering assault of insults and attacks from Democratic Party operatives along with their crucial media allies. Thinly disguised pro-Biden reporters who continue to insist on wearing the unconvincing and fraudulent costume of neutrality. They are invoking the classic Orwellian formulation from the novel 1984. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. Anyone who doubts that Biden is going through some things in his cognitive life should look at this clip of Biden being interviewed on Sanders and Hillary in 2016. I've shown that clip in a previous episode of the Bernie or Bust show. He sounds remarkably lucid and intelligent compared to how he is now. He's just not the same guy in this interview anymore. Could Jill Biden say something before it's too late? We covered that yesterday. This, progressive Democrats, is how much their party's establishment hates you. It is determined to serve up a right-wing dementia victim as a toy mouse food item for the feral, fascist, feline Tabby Trump this summer and fall, instead of mounting a serious challenge headed by the mentally agile, progressive populist Bernie Sanders. Could it be any clearer that the Democratic Party privileges its clientage to capital over winning elections and defeating ecocidal racism, sexism, nativism, fascism? No killer instinct. Maybe someone should have started a petition to Bernie saying something like this. Dear Senator Sanders, if you don't bring up Joe Biden's clear and obvious dementia in your next debate and in your campaign from now on, we demand the return of our contributions to your campaign. Your continuing silence on this matter will be proof that you have no serious intention of winning the nomination. Not that Sanders would have done the right thing. He doesn't seem to have the killer instinct required to prevail. He's too polite and intimidated by the Democratic establishment. You can bet Honey Badger Trump won't hold back on Biden's dementia. He's already locked in on Sleepy Joe's palpable mental deterioration, which the Democratic establishment now insists on tossing down Orwell's memory hole, even as Biden's memory card fades further in plain, nationally televised sight. One thing you can't say about Trump, who Noam Chomsky rightly describes as the most dangerous criminal in human history, is that he lacks the killer instinct required in high-stakes politics and heavyweight boxing. Social imperialism. With Demented Joe's clear victory, his defeat of Sanders in Bernie's Michigan firewall yesterday seals the deal. It's over. In the nomination battle, Sanders can be expected in due time to honor his unfortunate advance sheepdog promise to support the eventual Democratic nominee, no matter who it is. What a sad day that promises to be, stumping for the ridiculous and offensive right-wing corporate imperialist and dementia victim, his friend Joe Biden. It will be another great stain on his socialist legacy, along with his support for Hillary Clinton in 2016, also promised in advance, his backing of an F-35 base in Vermont, his embrace of Bill Clinton's war on Serbia, his vote for the 2001 authorization of unilateral military force against terrorists, the AUMF, which gave George W. Bush a green light to launch wars wherever he wished, his backing of Barack Obama's Libyan fiasco, his support for an increased U.S. role in the Syrian civil war, and his two 1998 votes in support of U.S.-led regime change in Iraq. All of that, dear readers and listeners, by the way, is fair and is true. Lenin had a phrase for European socialists like Karl Kautsky, who combined advocacy of left movements and reforms at home with support for imperial policies abroad: social imperialists. Lenin described such leftists as socialist in words, imperialist in deeds. I have said in previous episodes that Bernie is a moderate. He's not a true leftist. An Orwellian masterpiece. The media, a left friend writes from Michigan, did everything they could to paint Sanders as anti-American and radical and hide Biden's awful record. Why is it, a mainstream pro-establishment Michigan Democrat, MPEMD, responds, that Bernie can't just admit he lost without blaming it on a grand conspiracy? More voters voted for Biden because more voters wanted to. The MPMD is off base. Bernie hasn't acknowledged defeat yet and is too polite and respectful to blame his losses on a big plot. Call it a grand conspiracy of whatever you like. This is just an accurate description of historical reality. The media did everything they could to paint Sanders as anti-American and radical and hide Biden's awful record. That happened. It is precisely what occurred at liberal MSNBC, MSDNC, and CNN and other outlets. MSDNC is reporting on history it helped make, an Orwellian masterpiece, in the words of my friend Terry Thomas. And now, as Greenwald argues, that same liberal media is hiding Biden's dementia, even though the media operatives and managers are fully aware of the former vice president's mental debilitation. This isn't about conspiracies, it's about social and institutional power, and George Carlin's point: we have owners. AK-47? Voters who have been induced by their and the media's owners to want Biden have chosen a candidate who is going to be a sacrificial seal in the jaws of the great orange shark next November, unless a COVID-19 recession makes it possible for Biden to slip into an assisted care unit in the White House. Then perhaps a 25th Amendment removal, clearing the way for an Amy Klobuchar, AK-47, administration in October of 2021. Biden would veto Medicare for all, so reciprocate the hate. Meanwhile, this was just sent to me. Biden indicates he'd veto Medicare for all. Just because it's from Fox News doesn't mean it's not true. It's accurate. Bernie's literally demented friend, Joe Biden, would veto a measure to make healthcare a human right in the U.S. Think about that. Let that sink in. Biden is the very definition of a class enemy, comrades. The corporate Democrats are public enemy number one, in my opinion. The Trumpenfolk would never ride without these sorry, sold-out agents of capital posing as Democrats. Progressive Democrats, please have the mental and moral capacity to get and act on the simple and undeniable fact that your party's establishment hates you. Hate them back. It's okay. You need to turn your Bernie buttons in for yellow vests and gas masks. Last dance with Electoral Jane. If voting changed anything, Emma Goldman once said, they would make it illegal. Actually, dear readers, Emma Goldman didn't say it either. Although the famed author of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, among other works, has been connected to this bon mot by a number of websites, none of those sites provides any documentation about where and when Twain either uttered or wrote these words, and the quote is nowhere to be found among his literary writings, letters, or recorded speeches. Additionally, the wording of the quotation changes from source to source, e.g., if voting made any difference, it would be illegal. If voting made any difference, it would never be allowed, which suggests it has no fixed origin. Additionally, Mark Twain's isn't the only name that has been attached to this, though. American peace activist Philip Berrigan and Russian writer Emma Goldman have also been credited with originating this expression, although there is no evidence that either of them said or wrote it. Anyway, caucusing for Sanders was my last half-hearted dance around that coffin of class consciousness known as the American ballot box. Voting might change things in a decent way one day, but not under the existing and overlapping U.S. party, elections, and media systems. Last dance with Mary Jane. One more time to kill the pain. I feel summer creeping in, and I'm tired of this town again. He links to a Vimeo video of that signature song by Tom Petty, the creepy one where he tries to revive a corpse played by Kim Basinger. It's an apt visual and musical metaphor for those of us on the left who got sucked into the money-drenched mortuary that is American capitalist electoral democracy again. Victor Tiffany of Revolt Against Plutocracy just reminded me to mention, and I saw this on David Dole's show, that Hillary has made the statement that Joe Biden is putting together basically a reprise of her own coalition.
He is building the kind of coalition that I had, basically.
Hillary Clinton spoke with Fareed Zakaria, where she made a very revealing observation. Watch.
But I think what Joe's victories on Super Tuesday showed is that he is building the kind of coalition that I had, basically. It's a broad-based coalition. I finished most of the work I needed to do for the nomination on Super Tuesday, and then it kind of lingered on. And I think Joe is on track to doing exactly the same thing, putting together a coalition of voters who are energized.
But she was.
What?
That's just more proof to go along with Paul Street's proof that the DNC is trying to lose on purpose. So our answer is to continue to raise hell going forward and to share the fuck out of these videos. Keep on burning! Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernier bus train. The preceding episode can be viewed on the YouTube channel Bernie or Bust Television.